the interaction, it's between our genes and the environment, okay? So it's really not the right question. The right question to ask is, whatever is the genetic effect, can we do something about it so we block the bad effects of the environment? But when we look at centenarians, it's clearly that the genetic component, it's almost flipping. It's almost 80% genetics and 20% environment. I mean, we already talked about the fact that the environment is not what they're doing. They're like everybody else at their time. So the genetics component is much more relevant if you're really getting older and older and older, but not in kind of the mid, when everybody's dying at 70, 80.
I think you maybe brought some information or something about someone that you've worked with. Could you share that with us?
Oh, of someone, you mean the centenarian?
Yes, one of your centenarians. I think it would be great to see someone in action.
Okay, let me show you Irvin Khan. I'm not going to show more except the video. And the reason I'm showing it is when this video was done, he was almost 105.
Wow.
By the way, he died at 109 a couple of years ago. But the point that you should look at is if you're 105 and you're healthy, life is really terrific, okay? That's the point I want to make. It's about the health span and not necessarily the lifespan.
All right, great. Let's learn about Irving.
In this office building on Madison Avenue, New York City, 104-year-old investment advisor Irving Khan is working hard, as he has since his career on Wall Street began in 1928. He shares his secret to a long and healthy life.
To wake up in the morning and have something to look forward to.
Irving's curiosity and keen business sense have led him to become a widely respected value investor, a member of the New York Stock Exchange, and chairman of Khan Brothers, the company he founded more than 30 years ago with two of his sons, including Thomas, who is the president. Irving works 5 days a week with his 67-year-old son and 29-year-old grandson, Andrew.
And how are you going to link the underwriting projects?
Playing an integral part in managing over $700 million in assets.
This is the Aztec website.
And Irving says not working is unthinkable.
Well, I would pay you if you took it away from me. I try to buy it back.
He believes mental challenge is key.
The important thing is to keep that brain going, you see.
50.2 million increased 20.8%.
To stay sharp, Irving reads materials online, 2 financial newspapers daily, and a wide range of nonfiction.
I read a lot of science. I read no fiction, no mystery stories, and no sex novels. So that leaves a lot of time for science.
And it was Irving's interest in science that led him to participate in the Longevity Genes Project at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, led by researcher Nir Barzilai. Nir and his team have recruited more than 500 healthy elderly, ages 95 to 112, and their children. Irving and Thomas are part of the study, as is Irving's big sister, 108-year-old Helen Reichert, a former television host and fashion historian. So far, Nir and his team have found several gene variants that are more common in this group and protect against cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's.
Erwin has the CTP genotype that seems to be protective against several age-related diseases, including cognitive decline.
Nir's team has also found that some genes seem to protect against the effects of certain lifestyle habits. Irving, for instance, used to smoke, but quit to set an example for his children. And Helen smoked for more than 80 years.
You can see both from him and his sister that those genes have real amazing effect, not only on the fact that they're alive, but considering the fact that they were smoking, and this should have shortened their lifespan immensely.
And Irving believes long life has its benefits when it comes to business.
Because part of it is some of the advantages that you have when you're older And you know what's rotten and what's fresh and what's good and what's bad. And you can participate on a higher level.
That is so impressive. I am also very envious that you get to spend time talking to these amazing people who've lived so long and smoked for 80 years, but also done other many amazing things.
So let me tell you, he's a character, and his sister Helen. So I met Helen when she was 100 years old, and she opened the door to her apartment smoking. I kind of said, nobody told me not to smoke. And she looked at me and she said, all 4 doctors that told me to stop smoking, they died.
Wow, she sounds like a force of nature. I love her. You know, I was interested when Irving talked about mental challenges, like keeping his brain sharp, because in my family, I have this great aunt who lived to be 104. And a lot of people in our family really, point to, she was a university professor, and she always surrounded herself with, young people and stimulating conversation all up until she died, sharp as a tack. So, I'm wondering, are we sort of right that part of it? I mean, I think we've learned that a lot of it is genetics. Her sister lived to be 97. So, but what, are we right that there's something to that, the social aspect and the mental challenges?
Well, there might be. Look, it was a conversation I always had with Irving, that he thought he's like that because he's doing the crossword puzzle, right? But my point, but you're healthy enough to do the crossword puzzle. What's the cause and effect here? Mm-hmm. It is true that training the brain has benefit. It's true that challenging the brain has benefits. It's been shown in clinical studies, but the truth in all those people is that their aging has been delayed, and that's why they were able to do better.
Interesting. Are there other habits that can delay that aging that anyone can cultivate, whether you have this genetic history or not? Exercising? Is there a diet?
Yes, and I don't want to undermine it. So let me answer directly after I just make one sentence.
Great.
We human can live, our maximal capacity for longevity is about 115 years. We argue about it. There's somebody who live to be 122, but it's about 115 years. And by the way, I'm not saying at all that we'll never get over that, okay? I don't want to say that, but it'll take time. But the point is, we die before the age of 80, so we have 35 years that we can realize, okay? So how do we realize these years? If we do exercise and dieting, and I'll give you examples, we certainly can go beyond the age of 80. But to use our maximal potential as a species, we'll probably need more than that.
Can I ask you a question about the 115 years? How long our bodies last? Like, why is that our potential?
I'm just thinking how to say it simple, but
say it simple for me if you can.
Let me say it even more complicated, actually.
Sure, let's try that.
There's the second law of thermodynamics.
I've heard of it.
That says that things, we are stable just in a certain amount, and things are going to to disintegrate like old car does. And
okay, that makes sense.
I actually, we have the guy, one of the guys that pushed this theory is Len Hayfleck, that actually found the fact that cells can divide only that many numbers of time. And we argue a lot about this physical theory in application to aging. It's true to open system, not to closed system. So we argue about that, but it's instead of giving you all the arguments, there's probably a real limit, okay? But we know specifically where are some of the limits, and we can talk theoretically about way to overcome them.
Okay, great. So let's talk about that span then that we're not getting to between 80 or 85 and 115.
Right. So let's talk about exercise. And I put exercise on top because in every sex and in every age, exercise has benefits and great benefits. So there's no doubt that exercise is very important. And when people say we don't exercise or we don't exercise enough, how do we start? I think one of the simplest way to realize a lot of benefit is to walk and to try and get as close to 10,000 steps. If you have Fitbit or if you have an iPhone, you can follow that quite easy and get competitive with yourself and try to break your records. By the way, it's an advice that I gave people during the COVID epidemic because exercise also improves immunity by a lot. So exercise will do two things. It will improve the immunity, but it also will build a stronger body that can sustain severe disease, which some elderly get when they get the COVID. So it has those benefits. And by the way, I'm also practicing physician sometime, not very often, but sometimes on Thursday mornings, like today, I'm seeing diabetic patients in clinic. For 30 years, I'm asking my diabetic patients to exercise. You know how many exercise? 5 to 10%. Now, I'm in the Bronx. Maybe it's not a good example, but people don't exercise much. And then there's diet. And also, if I tell people to diet, which basically mean try and lose weight, maybe 3% will do it. Not knowing that this can cure their diabetes or delay the progression of diabetes for a long time. So those things are actually really difficult, just like stop smoking was difficult, but it's achievable. But there's really, I want to tell you one story that maybe will convince some of the audience here to do something.
Great.
This is called intermittent fasting or time restricting fasting or 16-hour fasting, 8 hours eating, 16-8. And I'll tell you why I believe in that and why I practice it myself. Because in the lab, one of the major way to extend health span and lifespan is to do caloric restriction. We take brothers into two groups. One eat whatever they want and the other group gets 60% of that. Those that get 60% of the food, they live healthier and they live longer, like 40% longer, okay? So this is an amazing. So whatever drug we want to test, we have a control group, which is the caloric restricted animals. See how much benefit do we get. So people took it to say, you know, you should give people less for lunch, for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. But that's not what we did. We actually gave the food in the morning to all the animals. They were hungry. So they ate all the food and then they were fasting for 23 more hours or more.
Wow.
And in fact, when we tried to give them less food throughout the day, they were thin because there wasn't enough food, but they didn't live longer. So
wow.
The fasting is an important part. And when I say 16-8, it's very simple what I'm saying actually. It's skipping breakfast. You know, if you finished food at 8 o'clock one night, don't eat anything until noon. You can drink coffee a little bit with a touch of milk, no sugar, nothing. You cannot break it. But if you can get, and many people can skip breakfast, many people think they cannot skip breakfast, but they're wrong. They're not hypoglycemic. If you can skip breakfast, you get the benefits that are important for aging.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because at Prevention, we try to not jump on every diet that comes down the road, but we have recommended intermittent fasting in the past for its additional health benefits, but I did not know about its aging benefits. So that makes me feel good that we're on the same page.
so let me say another thing. You know, if I've never dieted before, but I always knew if you give me a 3 months diet, I could break any time. I'm a foodie, okay? I could break any time. With 16 hours, you don't break because you have only hour or two to go, and then you can have whatever you want. So it's not a major problem to convince you to just hang in there. And when you do it a lot, it
becomes part of your life rather than feeling every single time you eat, you're restricting yourself. That's a really interesting way to think about it.
You lose weight, although a warning, men lose more weight than women on this diet, but you lose weight. Everybody loses some weight.
That's very interesting. Okay, so we're going to exercise and we're going to be mindful of our eating and think about intermittent fasting. You've said that aging is treatable, I believe. So does that mean that someday with all this kind of research you're doing, we take a pill for it? Or can you tell me more about what that means and how thinking about it that way changes things for people and for public health?
Yeah, yes, the answer is yes, we have a pill. And let me tell you where is our challenge. Our challenge is not that we cannot do it, not that we cannot repurpose even existing drugs to do it. The challenge is that prevention of age-related disease is not one of those indications that the FDA has, like it has for treating blood pressure or cholesterol, right?
Right.
And so American Federation of Aging Research, with a bunch of scientists, including me, we're leading a study called TAME to show that if we purpose a drug called metformin, we can live significantly healthier. But we're doing it, the studies has been done in certain parts of it. We're doing this study in working with the FDA in order to get this indication. And that will make it then easier to work with.
I see. That's interesting. If we think about it as an indication of something, then you can work towards it.
Right. So I think this indication is really important to get, because once we have this indication, I think we'll talk totally different language, all of us, and it will be drugs, combination of drugs, better drugs, where we can really make progress in getting to this, to live healthier and reaching closer to 115.
Right. Living longer, but healthier at that time. So, we have questions coming in, but before we start taking them, is there any final thing you want to be sure our audience remembers today? But then we'll do questions.
So 2 things. First of all, I said that aging is flexible. Aging can be targeted, aging can be delayed. Aging may be stopped in some organs and sometimes reverse even, and that's the future. The second thing is that I think it's crucial to know, and I have more on my book, there's a lot of information out there, and unfortunately, you know the time we live. People are lying without blinking, okay? How do you know when you're on the web and you see information, how do you know which is right and which is wrong? And what I encourage people to do is to think of clinical trials. That's what we're looking for. What is clinical trial? If you have any remedy, okay, you have to take people and you have to give half of them the drug or whatever, and half of them a placebo, and have an outcomes that you can analyze in a statistical way. If you don't have that, all you have is hope, and that's it. Okay, so you have to be really careful, because a lot of things, luckily, a lot of things are meaningless. They don't do anything, but there are things that can be harmful too. I always say it's good for the economy that you're trying lots of things, but some of it can be dangerous. And I think that's how we have to think of clinical trial to get information.
I'm glad to hear you say that. I agree. I think we are all capable and have the brain power to take a moment to think about whether what we're reading has that substance behind it. It's not something that only scientists can do, or only scientists in a certain field can do. I think we can all do that. Great. So let me ask you this question that we got. Do lifestyle modifications like exercise and diet have any benefit in lengthening telomeres? So can you talk about telomeres for people who might not know, and then about the question?
So, telomeres are those ends of DNA that it's not coding for a gene, but they get shorter every time the cell divide. They get shorter by other mechanisms too, and it became very popular. Actually, there are 3 people who got the Nobel Prize for understanding a little bit more of the telomeres, and we thought, oh God, we solved aging. Now, the shortening of telomeres is part of what's happening to aging, but we have 8 hallmarks where those are knobs that we can turn aging on and off, and telomere is part of it. But let me tell you the bottom line. If you have a short telomeres on average, you're likely to get heart disease. If you have longer telomeres than average, you're likely to get cancer, okay? So telomeres should be
neither one sounds that great.
average.
Okay.
Most of the models, when you try to elongate those telomeres, you get cancer. In cancer, the telomeres are long. You want to shorten them.
Right.
So it is really more complicated. The thing I'm saying is telomeres is not only it's not all, it's not a target for treatment.
Okay, that's really interesting. Great. Okay, we have a couple questions about when we were talking about intermittent fasting. So why is breakfast the best meal to skip? Someone asks, I would have thought it's better to not eat several hours before bedtime.
Yeah, so, unfortunately, diet is a science that had to start somewhere. and they started by saying, we have to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which, by the way, in evolutionary term is not right, because when we were hunters, we woke up in the morning, chase the deer, get it in the afternoon, do barbecue at night,
Right.
Kellogg's wasn't around. Pancakes were not around, okay?
Oh, Cheerios. Okay, yes.
Breakfast, in fact, is an invention of oatmeal, of Kellogg's, and stuff like that. Saying breakfast is the most important thing. You say it because you heard it from your mother who heard it on television or something like that, okay? And by the way, people are attacking me and saying, it's known that in kids, breakfast is important. I don't know if that's really true, but I'm not talking about kids. I'm talking about adults, okay? Breakfast is not important. But however, if you rather have breakfast and then wait, many hours or 16 hours, it's okay, because the principle is not about which meal you skip. The principle is when you're fasting, you're using initially carbohydrates for energy, and then it switches to fat. And it's when you're burning fat that, by the way, you're actually losing weight, first of all. But when you're burning fat, it's when you have ketones and when you can start getting the biological upregulation of aging, that protects against aging. So this is the point. Now, regardless, for many people, eating much before they go to bed has to do with the fact that there's a weakening of some of your sphincters as you age, and food tends to go out and up and not peristalse down. So you can get the food to go beyond your stomach, then when you sleep, it's better. But, this is case specific. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying the other thing is also right.
Right. So maybe there's an element of figuring out with the 16-8, where you're eating for 8, you figure out how that works best in your life and with your personal health. So, but another question on that is intermittent fasting something that someone should do every day to get the benefits, or do you do it a certain number of days a week?
Yes. So there are many, many forms of that. I should say that some people are looking at totally differently. They go for 5 days, 3 to 5 days of total fasting. For 3 or 4 times a year, okay? So they do like a crash fasting in order to really upregulate everything, and then they go back to food. There are people who are fasting 24 hours once a week or twice a week. There are people who are doing intermittent fasting 16 hours, 3 times a week. People are doing variety of things. And just like I told you in clinical studies, we still don't know that, okay?
Okay.
We still don't know that. I'm doing a study now at Einstein with my colleagues where our big hypothesis is maybe 12 hours is enough. 12 hours is enough. Maybe people will do breakfast and dinner, right? And you have more options. But what we're taking young and old people, and we're fasting them and looking at the biology, taking blood and samples and cells and trying to see what is really the time course to do that. Until then, people are practicing things, and my reaction is that even a little bit is better than nothing, but I'm saying it without showing you this knowledge.
Okay, got it. So you don't have a study on it, but but you believe there's value in trying that. Yeah. Great. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, do you think the reason women age longer is because of the positive immune effects of social interaction?
If I'm looking at the lab at female and old rats, I can take care pretty easily of the social interaction. By the way, there's a whole social interaction if we leave them in isolated cages or others, but the biology that we're looking is independent of social interaction. Saying that, social interaction is part of the things that we know for most people are very important. In fact, let me tell you this anecdote that is so terrible. One of my centenarians was 106, and she died recently, not from COVID-19. Actually, by the way, there's a lot of centenarians that got COVID-19 and recovered, totally recovered. I have 20 so far that I'm following across the world that are on papers.
Wow.
Why did she die? She was lonely.
Oh.
She was 106 and lonely. Couldn't see a relative. She couldn't see anyone. And she said, I'm out of here. I'm stopping to eat and to drink. And in a few days, she died. Okay? So the social interaction is important no matter what age you are. And I bet that it's important for men and not for women, although there are some differences in what's a meaningful social interaction between sexes, but it is important.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that anecdote. It's sad to hear, but really important to remind people how powerful loneliness is and how important it is to make sure we connect with the people.
And this COVID, the ageism of COVID. Is remarkable. First of all, by the fact that if you're 80, you're 200 times more likely to die when you're 20. Okay. Okay. First of all. Second, so the people who are old, the loneliness is just cruel. It's just cruel. I thought about Kamala Harris said, I'm not talking about politics now. I'm just rebranding a sentence she said. She said the virus cannot see, but or the virus doesn't have eyes, but through us, it sees how we look at other, right? She meant minorities and, who are dying. But for me, it's the same. It should be rebranded to aging. The virus is exactly how we look at aging. We have not targeted aging. We have not changed it. And the virus knows that. And those are the casualties.
That's so interesting. We had a question about COVID come in when you said about the centenarians who've survived. Can you tell us about how many have, and is there something we can learn from them specifically?
Well, we already describe in our studies how families of centenarians have better immunity because they have some of the biology of aging that is so much better. So we know a lot of the biology of that. But nevertheless, look, when you get to be 100 years old, your chances of dying is 30% next year, okay? So no matter what, they're at the end of their life. I mean, we're interested why they got there, okay? But they're at the end of their life. I found about 20 people that were where I could find articles about them across the world that had a confirmed COVID and recovered without a major disease. I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's possible. And I don't know though, you know, I don't know from the whole centenarians, how many got it, how many died. I bet not all of them survive, or indirectly, just like I described, the loneliness killed them, right?
Right, right. There's a lot of that we have to learn about COVID, of course. So we'll be interested in what you learn about how it affects centenarians. But someone else actually asked, how has it affected your ability to work with them during this time?
So we cannot go, by the way, we go to the Centenarian's house, to the Centenarian's place and work with them there. But we have another study where we are following the children of centenarians. The children of centenarians are healthier than age-matched control. They're really, that's another study that really takes everything we learned from centenarians and try to understand what happens when we watch their children. And we used to bring them over, and as I said, to do MRIs and CTs and stuff like that. And we cannot do it for now. So now we are on hold. However, we are starting with the American Federation of Aging Research. We're planning a study where we're going to recruit 10,000 centenarians. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to send them by mail a probe where they scrap their cheek. And that's enough DNA for us to actually do the genetics. So we'll know a lot about them, about their medical history, their age, everything, their family, everything. And we'll have something biologically to work with without jeopardizing them.
That's brilliant. That's so great. So if anyone on this webinar knows someone who gets one of those, encourage them to do it. We'll learn so much, right?
Absolutely. And AFAR Web will soon be able to do formally helping the recruitment of those people. And we need their names and addresses. Like your
Great.
Like your aunt.
Yes, yes. Tell us about, I know a lot of people are stressed. I mean, people are stressed all the time, but I think there's a lot of stress right now. How does stress affect genetics? And then of course, aging by, by extension, to stress as well as like good kinds of stress.
Yeah, right. So, stress is considered kind of, we're changing the terms a little bit, but it's considered part of the hallmark of aging. But we have to distinguish between stress, such as, for example, chronic pain. If you have chronic pain and you cannot sleep and it hurts and everything, this is a stress that is able to kill you, okay? On the other hand, consider another kind of stress, exercise, right?
Right. Right.
Exercise is actually a stress. You're increasing your oxidative damage during exercise. You're hurting your muscle, you have pains after that. But we know that no matter what you do, this exercise has been good to you. So you have to distinguish between them. As far as the genetics, if we go back to telomeres for whatever they are worth, part of what researchers have done is they looked at telomere length of women whose kids were hospitalized for cancer or other things. And they noticed that their telomeres are average than women at the same age of the population. However, when their kids recovered, their telomeres became longer again, okay?
Really? Wow.
So there is a talk between the environment and the genetics, but this is known more as in the field as something that calls epigenetic. How the environment interacts with our gene is epigenetics, because it's one thing that we're looking at the sequence of the letters of the DNA, but on top of the DNA, there are processes that could say, you know what, Eugene, I don't want you to be active, or the other way, I'm going to activate you. Mm-hmm. This is epigenetic. It's really very strong part of aging. And it's one of the things that is really an exciting research that's going on. Also supported by AFAR.
Yay, that's fascinating research. Wow. We have another really great question I am excited to ask. Are centenarians found in certain parts of the world more often? And what are your views on the blue zone research and the conclusions they make on their observations?
Okay, that's really good question. And this is what I think. First of all, I think the blue zone advisors are great, okay? As I said, even if it wasn't studied in other environments in controlled way, they're making an effort to do that. It doesn't matter because it's very simple what the blue zone suggests you do. But let me tell you one thing. First of all, the centenarians around the world, the WHO tried to see, are there really people who lived, by the way, much longer than 115, 160, 180? In the 50s and 60s, they sent people to those places and they couldn't confirm the age. In fact, they just knew that there are motivations. For example, in Georgia, next to Russia, a lot of people adopted their grandparents' date of birth or certificate in order to avoid the army. Okay, they were not as old as that. There's lots of motivations to validate an age is really hard. And in fact, when they went back to the same places 5 years later, the people basically said that they are now 10 years older. So you knew that they're not really counting.
Okay, right.
So we don't know that there's an area, but we know, for example, that in Sardinia, there are 3 villages where there are several 100-year-old male that are living longer than other, and they thought that's kind of a blue zone example. But it's not, because Sardinia is equal in the environment everywhere, and there are 3 villages on the other side of Sardinia where you don't have it. It's much more likely that there was a founder genetic effect in those 3 villages, and that's what populated longevity gene. It's the same with islands near Greece, where they said, they have olive oil and stuff. Well, in the next island, they also have this olive oil, and they don't have more centenarians. So for me, the centenarians has to have a genetic component, okay? And the genetic component and the blue zone may be additive to each other, okay? Or synergistic to each other. But I don't think that the blue zones really show that just by doing what they say, you'll get to 100 years old healthy. I think it's not going to happen.
Right. I can see that there's so many factors here that we're not just going to follow their lifestyles exactly and have that, certain people's, right? Interesting. So I have a few more questions before we close out our hour here. Someone asks, are there any tests available to learn what my biological age is versus my chronological age?
Yes, that's a great question, because we're very busy in creating those clocks, okay? And those clocks are really understanding what is biological age versus your chronological age. And one of the ways to do it is in what I described before as epigenetics, the fact that there are things above the chromosome that they can tell them to shut up or act. And the process that's doing that is called methylation. And so they're the methylation clocks, which were developed, again, in part by help of AFAR. And those methylation clock are used now commercially. So you can find in the web places where they'll say, we'll tell you your biological age. Um, and it's based on science. It still doesn't mean anything. You know, we want those markers to change. If you do something, if you get a drug, that they will change, um, so that you can follow that your biological age is actually getting better. And I think to this order we don't have anything.
We don't have that, but you do think if you take this test, it might actually tell you if you get a number back that's younger than your chronological age, you would buy that? I mean, not maybe you specifically purchase it, but would you believe it?
I haven't seen the science. Okay.
Yeah, got it.
The anecdote that I'll tell you is that every one of my friends that took the test was 10 years younger than their chronological age. So it's a little suspicious to me, especially that some of them don't look like that. But you know, because it's commercial, and I you know, so just know it's a. And maybe if you compare yourself in the same method all the time, maybe you get something out of it, okay?
Right, that's a good point. Your own personal little experiment.
I'm not against that. I think it's important. I think it's important for people to have data. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to say that this is your insurance now. You'd live, you'd live now 10 years longer. Because,
right. Good point. Is there any research that shows women entering menopause later in life helps to add to longevity?
So, you know, we showed that people with longevity have less reproduction. Actually, in nature, there is exchange between reproduction and longevity, okay? The less you have, the live longer, okay? Take whatever you want from that, but that's what it is. And our centenarians have less children in every generation than others. So in this study that we published, we actually asked our centenarians what age was their menopause. And I'm looking at the result and I just cannot understand it, because on, you know, 400 women or so, the average age of menopause was 50 plus minus 0. You know, no error. Like all of them had menopause in 50.
Wow.
I went to my nurse and I said, tell me, how did you get this data? He said, well, actually, it's interesting. Nobody really remembered the age of menopause. And I asked, so what do you think, 50? And they said, yeah, 50.
Okay.
Everywhere. So the point is that we don't know. We know that the women, that centenarians had their first son later than average and their last son later than average. And sometimes the first and last child were their only children. But we really don't know the age of menopause in relation to longevity. And by the way,
interesting.
It's hard because you don't have to be 100. You can ask women before that and they will, oh, but you know, menopause started and then, you know, it took several years maybe. And I don't know really my final age. So it's not so easy.
Okay, right, true. There's not like a one moment for it, of course.
Can I say, if we have to do, I want to say just one thing.
Yeah, please.
Important to know. We're talking about all the elderly adults, right? But listen, our success is important not only for them. It's important for children who undergoes chemotherapy or radiation because of cancer, or anyone who goes chemotherapy and radiation before cancers, because they get older much faster because we induce all this damage. People with HIV, they get diseases 10 years earlier than people their age.
Really?
Handicapped people, I mean, that's clear because they're not exercising, right? They're on wheelchair, and they're eating even more. They also age quicker. I would argue that in the United States, there are poor people who just age quicker for a variety of reasons. So this aging is not only about the elderly, it's really relevant to a lot of other people. And by the way, for the future, if we want to go to Mars, okay, and maybe we have to solve aging before, because of the radiation, we'll probably have cancer on the way there and we'll never make it back. So this aging is for a lot of people. It's important for a lot of situations and important for where humankind is going to.
That is fascinating to think about how aging affects space travel, really. That's what a great connection. So somebody did want to know about finding information about aging research and trials, like people who want to help you, I think, get the research you need for all of this. What can you tell us about the Centenarian Registry and things like that?
Well, I think the best information is in afar.com, the web of AFAR. It is full of information of, you know, whether you want specific questions, whether you want to know about studies, whether you want to volunteer. There's a lot of information there. I would start there.
Okay, great. Before we wrap up then, a lot of people are saying that they loved hearing about Irving Kahn and his family. And I know that you have other stories like that in your book. You tell us a little bit more about either your book or stories you could leave us with about some other people. I think hearing your anecdotes have been so fascinating.
Well, let me tell you about one thing that it's an anecdote, but to keep in mind. I met this 104-year-old man who was the loveliest man I ever met. I sat with him and he was so nice and so generous, and everybody's helpful for him. No bad words about his daughter-in-laws, and you know, was wonderful.
Good man.
And I'm going out of the room and I'm bumping into his son, who is like 80 years old, right?
Right.
And I'm telling his son what I just told you. And he looks at me and said, "You should have seen this son of a bitch when he was my age. He was a terrible, terrible person." Okay? So what did I learn? I learned that the centenarians have a really very positive attitude. They're extrovert, they're optimistic. And we think that that's what brought them here. But the fact that personality doesn't change is true with aging, but until 60 and 70, those people lived much longer. Okay, so they've changed. They lost their spouse. They had to move to another place. They are less resilient and less forgetful. So what you see at the end of the life doesn't tell you what happened before. Now, why did it happen like that? Well, out of University of Pennsylvania, there is a study where they showed young people and old people the same slides. Half of the slides were good, like islands in Hawaii, and half of the slides were bad, like cockroaches in pizza. They asked the young people and old people to recall what they saw. And of course, the young people remembered more. The old people remember less, but they remembered mainly the good things. Okay, so I'm waiting for this. I'm waiting for
I love that.
Where I recall only the good thing, but just to keep in mind, sometimes what I see is not 100-year longevity, just like with the story with the menopause. Who knows, years before, I have no idea
That's really great. People change, that's good, and let's remember the good things. I think those are great messages for us to end on. I'd really like to thank you, Nir, Dr. Barzilai, for your fascinating information today. And I'd like to invite everyone to join us next time. We have another Live Better Longer webinar on, it's in October, Keep It Moving, Immune Health, Muscle Strength and Exercise. And I'm really looking forward also to talking with Dr. Taisha Burks and Dr. Janet Lord about, staying strong inside and out throughout your life. And please, visit, follow AFAR, visit the site, afar.org, and follow us, Prevention and AFAR on social media where, you'll get updates on the webinars and lots of other great information about health and well-being for life. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, especially, Nir, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Terrific being here.
Thank you.